I'm going to sneeze. What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a book review of Monster Hunter Alpha. Yeah, so I actually forgot to record a review for this one. I finished this up last month, and for some reason it just slipped my mind to do the book review for this one. So before I jump into what the book is about, I do want to preface this review by saying this is book 3 in like an 8-book series. So I think it's going to be 10 books or something like that. But anyway, this is book 3. So there's going to be very light spoilers in here as far as character names, maybe some reveals. So if you guys haven't read book 1 and probably book 2, then maybe just add this to your watch later and come back when you are kind of caught up, because this will be spoiler free, but I'm going to go over some character names and things so you might know who survives in books 1 and 2. So without any further ado, let's go over what is this book about. Owen Pitt never met a monster that he couldn't shoot. Well, except for one. Earl Harbinger may be the leader of Monster Hunter International, but he's also got a secret. Nearly a century ago, Earl was cursed to be a werewolf. When Earl receives word that one of his oldest foes, a legendary vicious werewolf that worked for the KGB, has mysteriously appeared in the remote woods of Michigan, he decides to take care of some unfinished business. But another force is working to bring about the creation of a whole new species of werewolf. When darkness falls, the final hunt begins, and the only thing standing in their way is a handful of locals, a lot of firepower, and Earl Harbinger's stubborn refusal to roll over and play dead. Alright guys, so the way that I normally structure my reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things about the book that I enjoyed, the bad being the things that didn't work so well for me, and these are preferential things, maybe a character I didn't like, or maybe narrative choice, those kind of things. But then I go into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up, and I break that down into 5 categories. But before we get into that, let's go over the good. Now, I'm going to try to keep this review pretty short and sweet, and I'm not going to add a whole lot to what I've said about books 1 and 2, maybe just a little bit. So I'm going to try to go over these things fairly quickly for the sake of the viewer. So without any further ado, let's jump into the good. What were some things about this book that I enjoyed? Pretty much everything that you enjoy about books 1 and 2. So if you enjoyed books 1 and 2, you're going to like this book. If that's all that you're here for, and you really just want me to summarize it into one sentence, it's if you like books 1 and 2, you're going to like book 3. A lot of people complain that this is the weakest book up to this point. I would disagree, but it is different. And the reason for that is because we're not following Owen Pitt, who is our main protagonist throughout the series so far. Instead, this is almost like a side quest that we get to tag along with Earl Harbinger, who is the leader of MHI. So what did I like about this book? I actually liked that shift. I know some people aren't crazy about it, and I think you're either going to like it or dislike it. I don't think you're going to love it or hate it. It's not a lot better or a lot worse, in my opinion. I think it's just different. I think what it does, especially if you're binging through the series, is that what it's going to do is that it's going to be that palate cleanse within the series. And I think maybe that's what Larry Correia did, is that he decided, hey, I need a little bit of a palate cleanse. I still want to write in this series, but maybe I just don't want to focus on Owen Pitt's story, and maybe talk a little bit about this other thing that's going to lead up to some other big events moving forward. And I thought that was a very smart choice. So yeah, pretty much everything you like about books 1 and 2, you're going to like in book 3. It's just maybe amped up a little bit. And we'll get into that in a minute. So otherwise, yeah, I really enjoyed the vast majority of this book, and this may be my favorite in the series so far. So now let's get into the bad. So what were some things about this book that I didn't care so much for? And as far as preferential things go, there's not a lot. I definitely think that maybe it could be trimmed down just a little bit. I don't think that there's a lot of fluff in here or anything to that extent, but I will say it's a little thick. Now, these Monster Hunter books are deceitfully thick. So like this book right here is almost 600 pages. And while it may not look like it, the font is pretty small. And yeah, so it's a pretty thick book. And if you guys listen to the audiobooks, which I listen to the vast majority of this over audio, it's a pretty lengthy novel, especially for something that seems like, oh, this is just going to be like a fun pulpy read. It's pretty lengthy, and it took me almost all month last month to get through it over audio. Not that it was bad or that it was slow. It's not like, oh, it took me all month because I was dreading reading it. No, I've read it or listened to it consistently. It's just it's a longer book. But with that, that could be a pro or a con for you. For me personally, I thought it was just a little like a touch too long, but maybe you're the kind of person that's like, I'm so head over heels about this series that the more the merrier. For me, like I said, it just was a little lengthy, but otherwise I don't really have a lot to complain about. Now this leads me into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up, and I break it down into 5 categories. But I'm going to try to really trim this section down because, again, this is book 3 in the series. And so there's not a whole lot for me to add other than there are some things that are amped up a little bit. But just know that if you read books 1 and 2 and you were fine as far as the content goes, and maybe you didn't have convictions about continuing the series because of the content, I think you'll be fine with this overall. So, but I still do want to break this down into the 5 categories, starting with violence and brutality. Now, for violence and brutality, I would say this is actually amped up a little bit from the other books. So I'm going to give this a 7. And at times it can definitely be pushed up to an 8. It gets pretty violent. I mean, it's a book about werewolves and them sort of like a war between the werewolf factions and who is going to end up on top, which is, the namesake Monster Hunter Alpha. So we're dealing with these 2 factions of werewolves, really maybe even more than that, in this small town in Michigan, and they're kind of just collateral damage. There's a lot of violence and it's pretty brutal. So I will say this, and I will say it again later on, but this is really like a horror book. This is really more of a horror book than it is a fantasy book. So yeah, this is, I mean, it's a werewolf book. And really, once I'm thinking back about it, all of these books tend to lean more into the horror aspect rather than like the fantasy. So I would say this is like fantastical horror, or, they're horror books with like a touch of fantasy, which most horror books that deal in anything supernatural whatsoever, I would say dabble into that. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to find this book in particular in the horror section. So this leads me into category 2, which is sexually explicit content. Now for sexually explicit content, I'm going to give this a 3. Yeah, I don't think it's turned up any more or less than the other 2 books. There's nothing really like explicit about the book. There's just some like references to some different innuendo, those kind of things. Nothing to me that I was like, oof, I'm having a hard time getting through that sentence or that paragraph or that chapter. Wasn't anything like that. It's just, it's in there. As far as like, I wouldn't hand this to my son and say, take off with it. He's not there yet. By any means. I also wouldn't say, oh yeah, this is explicit, or yeah, they really go into some graphic detail. I don't think so at all. It's very, very, very tame. But like I said, if you read books 1 and 2, it's about what you can expect here. So this leads me into category 3, which is language. Now for language, I'm also going to give this a 7. The language can be pretty high. Emotions get high in this book. There's a lot of horrible things that take place to a lot of people. And so the language can fly off the handle at times. And don't be surprised if they're the heavy hitters. It's pretty frequent. I would say if you're sensitive to heavy language, you may have reservations about continuing on with the series, because from what I understand, this is sort of the status quo moving forward. So yeah, if you're really sensitive to vulgar language, I would say maybe don't pick this series up. Maybe find something else. But while I didn't necessarily prefer it, I don't like having that kind of stuff in my book. I understand why it was in there. Again, it's not my cup of tea. As far as that goes, I think you can almost always do without it. But I wasn't convicted about continuing. So yeah, I would say it's around a 7. Maybe you could push it up like +1 or maybe even lower, just depending on you. So I would say 7 with maybe the option to go up a point or maybe down a point. So this leads me into category 4, which is gratuitous inclusions. And for gratuitous inclusions, this is an absolute 0. For any of you that know anything about Larry Correia, he is anti-woke. So yeah, do not expect any of that kind of stuff in this book in any regard. I'm not just talking about like same-sex type stuff, but I'm talking about any like trans ideology, none of that stuff. He excludes that with a passion, mind you. It's just absent here. It's one of the reasons why I really like Baen books, or Baen, however you pronounce it. Is because they don't really care about your platform. They just want to know if you're a good author. That's why their catalog of authors like really varies. It's vast in spectrum. So yeah, gratuitous inclusions, it's just absent, so it's a 0. And so this leads me into the final category, which is dark themes. Now, again, for dark themes, I also include heavy themes. And with this being really a horror book, I'm going to give this like a 7, maybe an 8. Again, I would say 7 with a plus or minus 1, depending on your circumstance. Yeah, it can get pretty heavy because, like I said, it's a horror book with monsters and werewolves and other dimensions. So it does have the fantastical elements, but it is a horror book. How many times am I going to say that in this video? At least 2 or 3 more, probably. It can get pretty bleak at times. The characters in here don't really value human life very much, at least not the bad guys. The good guys do, but they also think that regular people just kind of get in their way. So yeah, it can get pretty heavy. As far as the spiritual aspect, it's not really in here. But the horror elements are in here, which are going to ramp that number up a little bit for me, which is why I gave it a 7. So this leads me to the final question, which is, would I recommend it to a Christian? And the answer is, I would if you enjoyed books 1 and 2. If you enjoyed the first 2 Monster Hunter books, yeah, I think the hook is probably set, and you're going to enjoy this one. Again, I think this might be my favorite in the series so far, just because it's different. I'm excited to get back with Owen and all the other cast of characters, but this was different, and so it did seem fresh. And as odd as it may sound, at the time I was really looking for like a werewolf book. Again, that may sound silly to a lot of you, but I was like, man, I really want to read something sort of along the lines of like the movie Silver Bullet, or those old like werewolf movies where the werewolves weren't sissy, or they weren't in a love triangle or whatever with a vampire and all that kind of stuff. I love like the old school lycans or lycanthropes that were just big, hairy behemoths that just wipe people out, along with a little bit of that mystery of, who is it? So you do get that here. It's definitely not that story. It's a lot more of like an army of werewolves fighting each other and trying to solve that type of a problem, which made it seem a little bit fresh. So yeah, I would say, would I recommend this to a Christian? Yeah, if you like books 1 and 2, I think you're going to like book 3, which means you're probably going to like the other books. So would I recommend it? Absolutely, if you like books 1 or 2. Would I recommend this series to everybody? Absolutely not. I would say if you're a fan of those kinds of movies like Silver Bullet, I think you'll like the Monster Hunter series. I think if you like Dresden Files, which I've said a million times, but if you like Dresden Files, I really think you'll like this. I think you'll like Larry Correia's writing because it's not overly flowery. And more than anything, these books are just fun. They're just a good, fun, pulpy kind of read. I don't want to say it's just like schlocky that, this is shelf shovelware. I don't think that at all. They're still good books, and there's still a lot of depth in here. It is sort of that pulpy series. I mean, the books have like, I don't know if you can see that, but like the moon is holographic on the cover, So, I mean, it's supposed to kind of look like those old cheesy monster movies that you'd see on the Blockbuster shelves. So overall, guys, I really enjoyed the book. I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. Let me know if you've started the series, and if you're farther along than me, let me know how you think I'm gonna react to book 4, because I've heard different things. I've heard some people say that they think I'll really like it, and I've heard some people say that I will really hate it. So I'm looking forward to it. If you guys have any questions about this series, please leave me a comment down below. I love talking to you guys, and I will answer anything that I can. But more than anything, please share these videos with your Christian brothers and sisters, because it is my goal with this channel that I could be a good resource to my brothers and sisters in Christ so that maybe we could spend our time, money, and energy a little more wisely on things that honor the Lord. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.